Midwest Whitetail is brought to you by Hoyt Archery, Fuse Accessories, Realtree, Muddy Outdoors, Cabela's, Rocket Broadheads, Frigid Forage, Trophy Rock, Easton Arrows, RTP Outdoors, Non-Typical Wildlife Solutions, Ozonics, Wilderness Athlete, Grizzly Coolers, Redneck Hunting Blinds, and Nikon.
I could park down at that bridge and walk the creek all the way up to right down there, and then walk the ditch up and then pop in. I mean, it's a long trip, but you wouldn't spook any deer.
Right.
We're down in this little valley where I created this food plot last summer and then finished it up this spring. And while I was putting this plot in here, I kept talking about how I was going to hunt this. And the two options were either a tree stand down here on this end or putting a redneck blind in here. And I always liked the idea of the redneck blind best because then I wouldn't have to worry about the swirling winds down in this valley. Also, because it's such a long hike in, by the time, boy, we're going to have at least a half a mile hike to get back in here. Might be one of those kind of spots where you pack it in and then you spend the night sleeping in the blind. So it's just a real handy kind of spot. If it's not too cold, I can see sleeping back down in here. It's going to be, once that clover really gets up and going, and it's growing pretty good right now, but once that clover gets up and growing, I think the deer are going to really pile into this little plot. It should be a fun spot to hunt. I'm thinking any buck cruising this whole country down in here during the rut is going to wind up coming past or through this little food plot to check things out. And one of the exit trails or entry trails is right here in front of me. And I know there's a heavy trail on the other end. There's two heavy trails on the other end. So I think the deer actually work down through this valley anyway. So now we've just given one more reason to stop here by putting the Pure Trophy Clover mix down in here. Like I said, it's doing really well. This was seeded probably 3 weeks ago, and you can see a lot of clover already. I'm excited about this one. It takes a lot to get me excited about a stand location now after all these years, but this is going to be a really cool spot to hunt. We've got the rich man plot and we've got the poor man plot. In fact, we got a bunch of poor man plots. I'm gonna call this one the redneck plot. Danny and his brother Greg Little came in to help us get some blinds in place, and while they're here, he had a bunch of his skid steer equipment and a couple of his skid steers. So I talked him into coming in this little spot here and roughing out a food plot. And I didn't realize when we started on this project that there were so many saplings that were 2 inches in diameter, but he made short work of it. We'll show you this whole thing in just a second, but what was once, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, a grassy knob turned into basically a patch of shingle oak. Now it's back to being a food plot again, which, you know, I guess if I'd have been thinking, I'd have had it a food plot back in here originally, but it's gonna be here now. We're gonna plant pure trophy clover and wild game buffet in here. And the biggest downside we've got here is these big oak trees on the fringes. And I'm not gonna cut those trees out or kill them. They're too pretty and they've been here for a long time, but they've got roots going underneath this ridgetop that are gonna suck the moisture out of here. So if we don't get a lot of rain during the summer, this will dry out. And whatever we plant here now is gonna die sometime between now and the middle of the summer. But we can always come back in here and clean it up again and put Big and Beastie in here. You know, some type of, you know, an August planting to catch those August rains and start over again. We're gonna hope for the best. We're gonna seed it down. We'll come back in here at some point in the next couple of weeks and we'll fertilize it real good. And then, you know, this should be one of those classic staging area plots that we love to hunt. Lots of timber out in front of me here. I don't know how many acres, and it's mostly sanctuary because I don't hunt any of it because it's too many ravines and too many swirling wind type areas. So there should be a lot of deer there just untapped. Come up here, hit this little opening, you know, feed around here during the rut. They'll mill around and scrape on these edges. Then they'll move on past and they'll go out to the bigger agricultural fields behind me. So in between we're gonna have, I mean, we've got the staging area plot, we're gonna have the redneck blind right here on this little point. And then anything that comes out here, we should be able to catch it as it moves past. So it's gonna be a really cool spot. I'm excited about it. At some point here before we get into the regular season episodes, hopefully we can get the drone up and fly this so you can see what this looks like from above. It's not working right now, it's in the shop, or we'd have it up in the air today. One thing I noticed when we were working our way back here that I let Danny and Greg know that maybe we'd have to do a phase 2 of the redneck plot. There's a pretty good sized opening off to the side where we could make a little companion plot. I'd say at least as big as this one. That just gives you options when you're hunting. You know, you don't have to sit on one spot over and over and over and burn it out. You can still be hunting the same movement pattern, but from 2 different locations. The beauty of this spot really is the lure of it for me. It's only about 75, 80 yards, maybe 100 yards at the most off the gravel road. But yet it's so isolated with all this thick cover back here, and being shingle oaks, they won't lose their leaves. The people on the road will never see in here, and the deer on this little food plot will never see any activity on the road. So we can park not too far away, pop out and sneak down this little lane that we cut and be right in this blind and hunting it without hardly any impact. You know, we're not going to educate a lot of deer by traveling long distances, you know, through the deer. We'll get off the road a little ways and let the deer come to us. So it'll be a fun spot to hunt. Like I said, we're just giving you a preview of it today, and then as we get into the regular season episodes, we'll show you more of an update on how this turns out, and hopefully get a chance to hunt the redneck plot a couple of times this fall. We've had a really productive 2 days. Yesterday we got that blind in down on that plot that we started last year and finished this spring. And that's gonna be a great spot to hunt. I've got a little bit of work left there. I've got to tunnel my way down to that ditch. Then I've got to clear the ditch out down to the creek and clear the creek out back to the bridge. So there's probably 4 hours of work left in that project just to get the entry exit route cleaned up on that one. This spot is the one that amazes me. We pulled in here this morning, maybe 9 o'clock or so, and within 5 hours, we took what was basically a solid stand of shingle oak trees and turned it into about a 1 1/4 to 1/3 acre food plot. We got the blind up. We did all of this in about 5 hours. And granted, I had some help there, and I certainly couldn't have gotten that stuff done by myself without a lot of help. But it shows you that having the cat skid steer and 2 attachments, basically the brush cutter and the Harley rake, pretty much all we used back in here to clean this up. And you know, you're looking at renting that stuff maybe $1,000 or a tiny bit more for a day, and not double that for 2 days. It'd be even more economical. So for $1,000, maybe a little bit more than that, you can create a really cool food plot from nothing. We've proven that today, and something that you can potentially consider doing. Cat has the cat rental stores where you can get a lot of this stuff, and there's also equipment rentals in most good-sized towns and small cities. So take advantage of that and create these plots. I mean, I'd like to call it a rich man plot, but we're not going to do that because this is something you can do even with a medium-sized budget. We're going to call this the redneck plot, and I'm excited about it. This is going to be one that, you know, we're going to spend some time in. I seeded it down with mostly the wild game buffet, and that's got the pure trophy clover, some alfalfa, and some brassicas. And that makes for a nice blend to fill in, you know, as we get going here. I mean, ideally the brassicas will be planted a little bit later in the year, but as dry as it is right now and there's no rain in the forecast, we're probably not going to get this kicked off very much until probably late June if we get some rain, or early July. So that's not super early for planting brassicas. This will be a nice little plot if we get some rain. We'll get back in here with fertilizer and get that cleaned up. But a little pure trophy clover added to it, and then otherwise it was just the wild game buffet mix. And I'll tell you what was in that. Frigid forage wild game buffet had turnips, forage radishes, forage brassicas, high protein clovers, and alfalfa. So that's it's a pretty nice list of ingredients. This will keep coming back. You know, this won't be a one-time seeding. These are perennials. The brassicas aren't. They're annuals, but the clovers and the alfalfa, that will come back again next year. So assuming that I can take care of this and get in here and keep this in good shape, we should be hunting over pure trophy clover back in this little food plot for a number of years to come. That's it for this week's episode. Got a lot of work done, and I'm looking forward to what this all looks like in a couple of months. We'll show it to you once we get into the main season shows. You know, we do a lot of stuff during the off season that we don't really reflect back on until we get into the, you know, August, September, October time frame in the main series, you know, not the off season series. So we got a couple more. I think we got this one and one more off season, and that's going to be it. Next week I'm going to put a bow together from scratch and show you how I set up a bow, and we'll try to find something else to go into that episode as well. But otherwise, we're coming close to the end of the off season. I appreciate you joining me this week. We'll see you right back here again next week for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail. And remember to always dream big.